Well, my name is Stephan Harding, and I teach holistic science at Schumacher College here in England, where we have a master's degree in holistic science. And I was born in Venezuela, next door to Brazil, and I came to England when I was 6 years old, and I always had a really strong love of nature. And so that love of nature took me into science, into biology and zoology, and I went to Durham University in England to study zoology. Then I spent some time in the African bush studying animals, and then I went to Oxford University to do my doctorate on a small deer. And then I went to Costa Rica to teach in the university, and then I came here to Schumacher College right at the very beginning when the college started, and I taught the first course here with James Lovelock, who is the originator of the Gaia theory, which is one of the most important scientific ideas of our time. And so he influenced me hugely, and now I teach Gaia theory and also deep ecology here. So that's my background. And I think the key message I would like to give to young people is that our culture has brought the Earth to the brink of a major change in the climate and in biodiversity, which will almost certainly make life very uncomfortable, both for humans and for the more than human world. And we have to do something about this very quickly because the time is running out. And that this change has been brought about by Western culture's emphasis on economic growth, on extracting more and more materials from wild nature and converting them through the industrial process to more and more products. And this is changing the climate of the Earth and wiping out the biodiversity of the planet. This is all very well established scientifically. It's called global change. Part of that is climate change, but it's a global change, including huge societal change. And we have to reverse this if we're going to have any future on the planet, both ourselves and millions of other species. So the most important thing I would say to young people is that the way to solve the crisis is to fall in love with the Earth. That's the most important thing, to fall in love with the Earth, to realize that the Earth is alive. That the Earth is alive. It's a living being that we are living inside of. That we live inside a great gigantic organism. Just like we have bacteria in our guts living inside us, so do we live inside the larger being of Gaia, the living Earth. And this is good science. The scientific understanding of the Earth now pretty much confirms that the Earth is life-like. I would say alive, but scientists would say life-like, self-regulating. That it's more like an organism than a machine. And we need to really feel that the Earth is alive and really love the Earth if we're going to solve this crisis. Because we can only save what we love. And so I would recommend that young people find any way they possibly can to fall in love with the Earth. And there are different ways. One way would be to spend time in nature, under the stars, with a campfire. Another way would be for other people to study the science of Gaia, to study how the self-regulation works. For other people it's contact with indigenous communities, particularly in Brazil, and learning from indigenous communities. So there are many ways to fall in love with the Earth. But that's the key thing to do, because I think only love is going to save the situation. Not fear, but love. Okay, what skills will you need to help solve the crisis? I think the major skill you need to have is wisdom. You need to know how to develop wisdom and compassion. And from wisdom and compassion will naturally flow the desire to consume less and also to cooperate in order to reduce our consumption of material in the West and to allow the really poor people of the planet to consume more so they can raise their standard of living. But we can't do this unless we feel compassion. We have to really feel the love for other people and concern for other people and concern for the planet before we can do this. So the main skill is to develop compassion. Compassion is a skill. It's something you can cultivate. There are ways to do it. In Buddhism there are many kinds of meditation to do it. In Christianity there are many prayers and contemplation you can do it. In psychotherapy there are ways of doing it. There are many different forms. So I would say the primary skill is wisdom, out of which grows compassion. So join a wisdom tradition. I think that the profile that facilitators of the change process will need involves various things. First of all, good scientific rational knowledge about the condition of the planet, about the way in which the mainstream economy is destroying the climate and the ecology of the planet, and also a good understanding of climate science and ecology. So those on a rational level, on an intellectual level, those facilitators will need to understand these main things. Key ideas from ecology, how the Earth works as a self-regulating planet, and the details of the current state of the Earth and configuration of the Earth, and also how the current economics is having a terribly negative impact on the planet, her people and her species. That's one thing. But deeper than that, I think these facilitators will need to have a deep, deep sense of connection with the Earth as a living being. They will need to have direct personal experience of embeddedness in nature in a really deep way. They'll have to, all their cells will have to be tingling with the experience of the living Earth, so that they can communicate this intuitive insight to the people that they're working with. So I would say those are the two main characteristics of these new facilitators. Very rigorous intellectual understanding of the Earth and of the current situation, and very deep, you could almost say spiritual if you like that word, connection with the Earth and a sense of compassion for all beings. Those two need to be combined together in these new facilitators. Okay, you asked me about self-knowledge. Does the facilitator have to have self-knowledge? I would say yes. The question is, what is the self? Normally, we tend to think of the self as just me, this human being. I have to know my feelings, my thoughts, my emotions, my desires, my tendencies, my negativity. I would like to change that notion of the self. For me, the self is nature. There is only one self, with a big S. One of my teachers, the great Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss, he talked about the ecological self. That's the big S self. So in order to know myself, the big S self, I have to understand Gaia. I have to feel connected with the trees, with the atmosphere, with the ocean currents, with the great rainforests, with the tundra, with all the great biomes, with all the great life of the planet. That's myself. And you can even extend it further out to the solar system and the whole cosmos. That's our self. That's who we are. And if we can be in tune with that life, the greater life, then we are also gaining self-knowledge. So only when we're in tune with the greater self are we really developing self-knowledge. Because there is no division between ourselves, the psyche of the individual human being, and the great psyche of nature. So this is a different view of the self, an ecological view of the self. So a little bit more about self-knowledge. We would say, who are the great teachers of self-knowledge? Who are the gurus? Of course you can have a human guru, but I will also say mountains are gurus. Forests are gurus. Wild places are gurus. Even a flower can be a guru for self-knowledge. So we're surrounded by the gurus of nature, and they can be as powerful and as frightening and as awesome as a true human guru. So I would encourage people to find gurus in nature as much as a human guru. So indigenous people have a great deal to teach us in the West about life and about how to relate to nature, and about how nature is not a dead machine, is not a set of resources that we can exploit as we wish, but how nature is really alive, how the whole forest or the whole planet is a great living being. They, for many thousands of years, have experienced rivers as full of soul, rocks and mountains as full of soul. Everything is full of soul. And we've lost this view in the West. They've built whole sustainable societies on the understanding, the deep experience, the truth that the universe is a great sentient being that we must deeply respect, that is fully alive, deeply intelligent, that we must learn from. And the indigenous people of the planet have maintained this wisdom, whilst we in the Western world have completely lost it. So we need to learn from them about how to recover this wisdom in ourselves. We need to approach them with great humility, and we need to ask them for their help and their wisdom. And this can help their culture to survive, and it can help our culture to become wiser. And in that way, in the meeting of the indigenous culture with Western culture, we Westerners can find the indigenous in ourselves. We can reconnect with the indigenous sensibility in ourselves that can really give us deep happiness, and also can make our society deeply sustainable. And for the indigenous people, perhaps we can give them some renewable technologies or some Western medicines possibly that can help to improve their lives. Although I would say that if there are indigenous communities still left that are living very much as they used to in an undisturbed way, I would say that they need absolutely nothing from the West. I think what's really important to help people connect with nature is experience of nature. Preferably in wild places, but it doesn't have to be a wild place, but a wild place really helps. I think people need to feel how vast and how frightening wild nature is, how vulnerable we are in wild nature, how awesome wild nature is, how inspiring, but also how dangerous it is. We're missing that in our lives. We need contact with the kind of numinous power of nature. And so I think if people can go into a wild place, this can really help. But it doesn't have to be in a wild place. It can be gardening, just getting your hands dirty in the soil. I shouldn't say dirty, sorry. Getting your hands into the soil can also give you a sense of the awesome power of nature. Anything that moves you out of your limited human frame into the wider sense of the living earth can help very much. In my own case, I had an experience like this in Norway, in the mountains of Norway, when I was going up into quite a humble, small mountain. And I got so far, and then I felt the mountain saying to me, "Who are you? Why are you here? I don't want you to go any further. If you go any further, I could throw a boulder down on you. You better go back." So I went away. The next day I came back, and I felt the mountain saying to me, "Ah, it's you again. Why are you here? I'm still not sure who you are. Go home again." Then the third day I came back, and I felt the mountain was beginning to get to know me. And eventually, by the fourth day, I felt the mountain had given me permission to explore its wild domain. And that was a very frightening experience at the beginning, to feel that a mountain could throw a boulder down on me, that I wasn't welcomed by the mountain. It was a really huge, vast sense of the power of nature, which could wipe me out very easily. And also eventually, after a few days, a sense of being accepted by nature and getting known by the mountain much more. So I think we need to be able to understand nature as something with a vast, much vaster intelligence than ours, that as a far greater sense of being, intelligence, a really ancient being that we can connect with and that can really inspire us. This is what we have to do through experience. And you can only do that by being in nature. You can't read it. You can read about it, but it's not going to work. You have to actually be outside, experiencing nature. So I would suggest that as many people as possible need to be outside in the natural world.